Hello, and welcome to an overview of embryo donation in Canada. I'm Lisa Feldstein, a fertility lawyer who's been practicing in this area for over a decade. In this presentation, I'm going to share with you some of the important information that will hopefully be helpful if you are considering or you are embarking on an embryo donation journey. So we'll start off by the basics of the law. Embryo donation in Canada is perfectly legal. It's not in some shady gray zone. It is absolutely legal. However, it is against the law to purchase or sell embryos. Although embryo donation is legal, it has to be altruistic. We do not have any commercialization. So anytime anybody donates their embryos or receives donated embryos, it has to be where money is not exchanging hands unless it's lawful reimbursements. For example, reimbursing somebody for the legal fees, as we will get to later in this presentation. So we'll start off at the beginning. How does one find embryo donors? Most people do not imagine they will be in a situation necessarily where they have to find someone willing to donate their embryo. So where do you begin? Well, nobody is creating embryos just for the sake of it. So embryo donors are typically people who have gone to a fertility clinic for themselves. They needed to go through in vitro fertilization. They're done completing their family, and they are lucky enough to have extra embryos. And then they face the decision, what do we do with these embryos? And some people, most people, will not want to donate their embryos. There's other options like destroying them and donating to research. But for some, donating to another person or couple aligns with their values. And those are the people you need to find if you're looking for an embryo donor. So how do you find them? There's not just one way. There's not any national registry I can tell you about. Some people are finding each other through the internet. And of course, you have to be careful about that, but certainly I've seen it done. There are Facebook groups and other kind of informal ways people are finding each other, because if you're looking for a donor, there's also donors out there looking for recipients. It does go both ways. And so there's social media. There are also organizations where they are professional businesses or nonprofits that will facilitate those relationships, a bit like a matchmaker. And those can be really useful because in some cases, they do a lot of hand-holding, screening, ensuring there's values alignment. And I love when people have gone to those organizations, because when they come to me, their contract is clear. Their vision has already been established because they've worked with that organization. They're a good fit. They've answered a lot of the hard questions already. So those organizations can be really, really helpful, not just for finding people, but laying out a future and ensuring there is values alignment for what the relationship between these two different families is going to look like. So a few things I do want to note at the very beginning. It is important to consider how many embryos are being donated. If somebody has only one embryo to donate, that's not always the best decision because there's a lot of time and money that goes into this process, and one embryo does not provide the best odds. So usually it's ideal to select a donor who has more than one, as many, the more the better, but certainly at least two, to ensure that everything being invested into this process has a greater chance of actually resulting in a baby at the end of the day. The other part that's important to keep in mind from the very beginning is authority to donate. So what do I mean by that? Some people have embryos that were not created with their own genetic material. For example, let's say I created embryos with my husband, but I used an egg donor. That's not my genetic material. Do I have permission to donate that embryo? Maybe, maybe not. That's because under the law in Canada, the Assisted Human Reproduction Act, we have consent regulations. And yes, donation is legal, but this is a very special kind of gift with strings attached. And the strings, metaphorically speaking, are what you're allowed to do with someone else's genetic material. If somebody donated their eggs to me, she might have said, it's just for you, Lisa, because you're my friend. I don't want you giving that to anybody else. Or I'm against research. I don't want my DNA out there, something I've heard from egg donors. So depending on the donor, they may or may not have allowed redonation of their genetic material. And that's really important to find out at the beginning. Otherwise, you can waste time and money, get further down the path, and someone will hopefully be asking questions about, do you have authority to donate? And there are times that we've gone back to fertility clinics and agencies trying to track down donors to see if they signed paperwork or will they sign paperwork now. We need to know that they gave their permission to subsequent third-party donation. So it's good to talk about that right in the beginning to ensure that it doesn't become a barrier down the road or perhaps result in the entire donation falling apart. It also makes sense to get legal advice about the birth certificate in advance. So by that, I mean, where is the baby going to be born? If you or your partner are going to be carrying the child, probably the baby will be born in the province where you reside. But if the donor, for example, if you're not going to be genetically related to that child with embryo donation, that's the case, you just want to check with the lawyer to make sure what's the legal process. Is there anything I need to know? What does it look like to get a birth certificate? And you may be told it's the same birth registration as it is for everybody else, or you may be told some other information. So it just makes sense to be sure and touch base in advance in case there's anything that needs to be brought to your attention, in case there's any barriers, or in case there's a rule about when you or your partner needs a genetic connection. So always just good to confirm at the outset, what will this look like later to prevent the possibility of any legal issues down the road. So the legal process involves a few steps. The legal process is the easy part. First, the intended parents, those are the recipients. They will meet with their lawyer, get legal advice, work on the first draft of the contract. Once they approve the draft, it gets sent over to the donors. This could be in the other order where the donors draft it, usually not. The donors will meet with their own lawyer and they get independent legal advice and share their feedback on the contract. They might want to make some changes. Once the contract is finalized and everybody's happy, it gets signed. And then the lawyer, usually the lawyer for the intended parents, will send a letter to the fertility clinic or clinics. There might be more than one if the embryos are being transferred from one place to another. That letter is known as a clearance letter, and it's confirming to the clinic's ownership of the embryos has been transferred and everyone can proceed. So what goes into an agreement? Mostly it's mapping out the relationship. What is the dynamic between these families? Will the children know about each other? Are they sharing genetic information? When a baby's born, are they going to share the name and birthday and all that? And typically embryo donations are quite open, but the specifics of the relationship are really the heart of every embryo donor agreement. There's also discussion about what happens if there are leftover embryos for this couple as well. Are they going to redonate them, discard, donate to research, and so forth? So in terms of the timing, how long does this process take? The legal process usually doesn't take too long. I often recommend people budget at least a month because I don't want anyone to rush or feel like they're making compromises they will regret later when we are talking about something as important as building a family and relationships between families that will literally last a lifetime. But most of my clients, when I ask them the deadline, they say there's no hard deadline, but ASAP. They are waiting for this contract. It's the last piece. Everything's been done except for the contract. So usually there is an incredible sense of urgency, but it is important to slow down enough to do it right and make sure that the donors or NIPs are a great fit and everybody feels comfortable and happy moving forward. So that's it for this overview of embryo donation in Canada. Good luck with your journey. And if you want to reach out, you can find me all over social media. We have a YouTube channel and I'm on many other platforms. So take care and good luck.